Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP, who always wanted a family of their own, despite a troubled family background and their own fibromyalgia, they built a life together, buying a trailer home and finding stability. However, the user's wife began cheating during her hikes. After discovering her infidelity, the user ended the marriage. Now let's get into the story. Ever since I was a child, I knew I wanted to have a family of my own. I didn't like the family I grew up in, so I started to tell myself I would do better if I ever got the chance. In high school, I met the girl that would become my wife. On the nights when my stepdad felt like blaming me for the family's problems, she would meet me at the forsaken playground, gazebo. She brought sleeping bags, pillows, snacks, and a tablet to watch movies on. It was lucky we lived in a southern state, where sleeping outside wasn't a problem much of the year. Nothing ever bothered us in that gazebo, not even bugs. I was convinced at this point that she was my guardian angel and I would marry her. After the nonsense that is high school was finally over, we got married at 18 years old. Her parents weren't thrilled, but they knew me for years at this point. They allowed us to live together in the basement of their house. Meanwhile, my wife was the sweetest, most understanding woman in the world. She truly loved me. She chose me to be her husband, so I made it my life goal to improve our lives together. We each started working. Neither of us liked our jobs very much, but it was just so we could start accumulating some money. My wife knew how to be selfless and get things done. After 10 months of working full-time, we had earned enough money to buy our own trailer home. It was considerably nicer and larger than the basement. Together we could afford the lot rent and all the bills we acquired. My wife was lucky enough to get a job she wanted to work for the rest of her life. I, on the other hand, was diagnosed with early-onset fibromyalgia. I had intense pain all over my body that was hard to ignore. I tried working through it and I couldn't. I got a type of pain medicine meant to block the pain receptors, but this made me feel like I was in a dream and completely unable to focus on the tasks at hand. I felt stupid and worthless. During this time, I stopped working and stayed in bed a lot. My wife was my rock and peace. She continued doing what she loved and started taking care of me when she got home. She cooked meals for me, washed my clothes, and vowed not to judge or hate me for what was happening. It was the kind of unconditional love I felt I didn't deserve but always wanted. Eventually, I felt well enough to start painting miniatures. These little game pieces and models are actually worth a lot of money when they're painted well. I never realized my knack for painting until this part of my life, when I felt trapped in my own body. It was just what I needed to boost my confidence and finances. I was able to sell these figures for 4x the amount I paid for them. My wife was extremely happy for me and encouraging. Things started to change when my wife realized how great it would be for us to start going on hikes and traveling together. I knew she was getting bored with the daily routine and needed to have some adventure, so I started taking her out on dates. Considering how I felt, I usually suggested things like restaurants, plays, darts, pottery, the cat cafe, or karaoke night at the bar on the corner. Sometimes even some of those took a lot of energy and brain power I just didn't have, but I did my best to show my wife I could be her man. 5 years after moving into the trailer, my wife didn't want to do these dates anymore. She really wanted to start going on hikes and doing things I just didn't want to do. I suggested she go without me and try to find a group of people to go with. She was all too willing to do that. It was like she was relieved that I suggested it. A few days later, she returned from what she claimed to be her first hiking trip with us. She was extremely happy when she told me about the hike, admitting that she mostly talked to one person who was extremely nice and outgoing. My wife called this friend, but I wondered if she was lying because of how my wife spoke to me and made eye contact. I just told her I was glad she was happy and hoped that wherever she went, she would remember how much I loved her. She blushed, said she always would, and kissed me. A few days after that, my wife asked me why I never went out with any of my friends. I told her I didn't need any friends. I was an introverted loner and stronger for it. All I needed was myself and my wife. She smiled and went quiet. The very next day, she told me her dad needed help moving some stuff out of the basement. This was the exact kind of request I hated. I agreed to do it and headed to their house knowing that it wasn't going to be pleasant. When I returned home, I could have sworn I saw a car back out of my driveway before speeding away. The timing was just close enough that I could see it from far away. I entered the house and asked my wife, who was just here. She froze in her tracks, looking like a deer in the headlights. She slowly told me that no one was here. It was just her. I looked around and smelled the air like I was some kind of hound. My wife's face was turning red even though her body didn't move. I searched the house and our bedroom for any clues while she remained silent. It was weird. I found half a footprint by the front door, like someone's shoes were wet and they stepped on the rug before taking them off. The shoe print didn't look like ours, but I couldn't rule it out. I sat on our bed and just had a gut feeling that something was wrong. My wife appeared in the doorway with her arms crossed. She called me Sherlock when she asked if I found anything. I walked up to her and tried to playfully pull her into the bed with me, but she refused, claiming she had to make dinner. 1 month later, my wife had gone on 2 more hiking trips. She took selfies with the group and supposedly pointed out the girl she'd been getting along with. Even though my wife had tried to suggest I get out of the house too, I didn't unless it was with her. I didn't feel right about leaving her in the house alone. I was painting in the spare room one evening, expecting my wife to get home much later. I felt a very faint thud on the floor. It was so faint that I thought it might have been the refrigerator or AC kicking on. A few minutes later, I had a terrible urge to walk around the house. I went into the living room, looked out the window, and didn't see my wife's car in the driveway. I got a drink from the kitchen, and as soon as I started to head back to the spare room, I heard something. I couldn't tell what it was, but I went to our bedroom door and found that it was locked. I was extremely confused because you can only lock the door from the inside. I got a lockpick and popped it open, which is when I heard my wife's worried voice. The door swung open, and I saw a naked man I didn't recognize get off my wife, grab his clothes, and leap out the open window. My wife was half covering herself with blankets, looking at me like a lost puppy. She started saying how sorry she was, but as soon as I started losing my mind, asking her what the heck I just saw, she got defensive. She said I wasn't an adventurous or active man, which really bothered her. With my voice cracking, I asked her if that gave her a right to cheat on me, to break our vows in our own bedroom while I was in the other end of the house. She was crying hysterically, defending herself while also admitting she was wrong. My vision started to spin and I passed out. When I came to, she was crying over me. I told her to leave. She said she couldn't because she was my wife. I told her she wasn't anymore, so she wanted to call her mom. When her mom realized what happened, she told her daughter how despicable she was. I knew she was being lectured because my wife couldn't get a word in. She was whining beside herself until her mom showed up at my house. She asked me if I was going to divorce her daughter the way she deserved, and I said yes. She immediately went to start grabbing her essentials so she could move out. My wife was just screaming. She wouldn't stop saying sorry and begging me for another chance. I barely had the strength to look at her and tell her how much she broke me. I didn't feel the intense love I had built for her over the years. It was immediately gone, leaving a gaping metaphorical hole. She said she felt the same hole, and that we could fill it by staying together and refusing to give up on our marriage. I told her she broke it, and it was shattered. There's no sense in keeping tiny, itty-bitty pieces of a shattered relationship. She didn't agree with my metaphor. She believed we could stay together, but only because she was the one that messed up. If it was me that would have messed up, she would have refused to forgive me. She admitted that in court when the judge asked her how she'd feel if it was the other way around. I was not ordered to pay alimony, and I got to keep my house. The joke's on her because I started making a crazy amount of money every month with my miniature painting. I invented my own group strategy game, which sold for over 6 figures. It's been years and my wife is still single, living in the basement we started out in. I've remarried and handled my marriage in the same way I did my first one, except this time, my wife is actually worth it. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his wife in high school, and they were inseparable, marrying at 19 and 20. After catching her cheating with the man who saved her from a car accident, he confronted her, resulting in divorce and custody of their child. She now struggles with depression and isolation. Now let's get into the story. I met my wife while we were in high school. She was the first girl I ever confessed my feelings to, and I was lucky enough to have them reciprocated. We were pretty much inseparable after this. I only wanted to go through my crappy high school days if she was there with me. Something about her, maybe it was her aura, made me feel so much more peace. I was there for her through her parents' divorce and her mom's untimely death. Her mom had cheated on her father after 27 years of marriage, and my wife believed the amount of remorse and guilt she felt is what caused her to pass away. The divorce and passing of his ex-wife just made my wife's dad even more certain there was a family curse. Despite this troubling time, our relationship and love for each other never faltered. We got married at the ages of 19 and 20. My wife's outlook on life wasn't the best all the time, but she understood that there were ups and downs and that life didn't owe us anything. Despite that, we were happy and capable, remaining strong for each other. We planned to wait at least 5 years before having children, but my wife became pregnant with our first child at the age of 22. She wasn't very happy, and she blamed it on her nervousness to become a mother. I assured her that we could do anything together and that this was how family life was supposed to happen. In marriage, the children are conceived and the parents work through any obstacles life throws at them. My wife started to believe me and felt more hopeful and strong. Things were blissful up to and after the flawless birth of our daughter. That's when my wife's mind started to change. She didn't see herself in the same way she did before she had a baby. She never acknowledged how much value she put in her physical appearance. Once her belly was wrinkled and saggy, she had a hard time even leaving the house. She was a stay-at-home mom and always wanted me to do the errands when I was off work. Sometimes I was too exhausted and I didn't want to do it. Genuinely needed her to go. Whenever this happened, she didn't fight me. She just went and got it done. Dates were non-existent. She wanted to stay at home because she didn't have anything to wear or any number of extra excuses. She had that all pertained to her appearance. I didn't mind dating at home, and we even had her father or my parents watch our daughter for us while we had some time alone. I always told her she was my woman for life, and that I would always love her body unconditionally. That's all anyone can ask for, right? I knew she was my wife for life, and I never put any conditions on that, including her appearance. I told her I would spare some money for her to get clothes she liked to wear, but she didn't want to buy clothes at that size. I told her I would work out with her every day, but she always made an excuse as to why she couldn't. She started talking about the family curse her dad believed in. I told her that just wasn't logical, and that she had to be the master of her fate to the best of her ability. My message went unheard until she was involved in a very bad car accident. A car pulled out in front of her, causing her to veer off the road and off an embankment. Her car wrapped a tree and started smoking. When I got to the hospital, she was conscious enough to tell me that someone saved her life. She said a man climbed down seconds after her and pulled her up the steep wall to safety right before her car exploded. I could hardly believe it. I told her that after this, she could say the curse was broken because she survived. She asked me to ask anyone in the hospital or police force if they knew who that man was. I tried to find out for her, but no one knew. After she was discharged, life at home was almost back to normal. I noticed she wasn't struggling with her self-esteem or overall doubt anymore. She told me she believed that the curse was broken because she survived. I was happy for her and loved this positive change. In hindsight, I did notice a few clues. I found a cigarette, but in her front yard. I asked my wife about it, and she played dumb. She suggested it belonged to the long guy. My wife was spending more time on her phone, but doing it at times I wouldn't notice because of being at work, being in the bathroom, being in a different room than her, when she was cooking dinner, or when she was gardening. I never noticed enough to bring it up to her, and the biggest thought I had about it was that she was glad to be alive and was keeping in touch with her relatives and friends. Shortly after I came to this conclusion, I arrived home to find a strange car in the driveway. I could smell burgers and dogs in the backyard. When I got back there, I saw my wife talking to another man while he cooked on the grill. I asked them both what was going on, trying to be nice just in case. This wasn't something I needed to be alarmed about. My wife smiled and introduced me to her hero, the man that saved her from the car. My stomach flipped. I didn't feel great about this. I never really wanted my wife to have male friends, especially not one that she felt indebted to. I didn't have any female friends because I refused to give temptation an opportunity. He was a good-looking man and taller than me by a few inches. No wedding ring. Through awkward chit-chat over dinner in the backyard, I found out he was a firefighter, and that before saving my wife, he'd saved 3 dogs and 2 cats from burning buildings. My wife loved that. I felt nauseous. I called at night and started cleaning up. My wife was disappointed, but let him leave. She was exceptionally quiet for a few days after this. I tried to tell her I didn't want her to be friends with him because it was unnecessary and just opening the door to temptation. She said I needed to trust her to be a responsible married woman and that she would always keep their conversations PG. I told her I didn't like or want this. We dropped it for a few days, until she sheepishly asked me if she could go out for a drink with AP. I told her absolutely not. She was upset and said I was being controlling, and that she could have her own friends without me being there. I told her that before all this happened, she never went out anywhere, not even with me. So I asked her what made her suddenly want to go with this man. She didn't have an answer, besides that he was a good friend, and she didn't want to start going out more. I told her we could go out together, and I'd ask her dad to babysit. She made a face. I knew at this point our marriage was in trouble. She didn't want to go out with me as much as Hero. I told her if she wasn't going out with me, she wasn't going out with him. I suggested she meet other stay-at-home moms so she could meet up with them and get out of the house. She jumped on this opportunity. The next day, she texted me while I was at work, telling me she found a group of moms that meet at the park every Wednesday to do yoga and let the kids play together. When she was supposed to be there, I left work to check. I found a group of moms doing yoga, so she could have been telling the truth, except my wife and daughter weren't with them. I went home and didn't see AP's car. I opened the front door quietly. I heard our daughter crying from her room upstairs and music coming from the finished basement. My heart started pounding. As I got closer to the basement, I heard the unmistakable sounds of passion. My wife's voice mixed with another man's. I walked down the stairs filming. My wife went all out for this. At least 50 tea candles were lit with rose petals scattered all around. They were having intimate on the pool table. As soon as my wife turned her head and saw me, she jumped up and started saying no over and over again, realizing she was caught red-handed. She grabbed a blanket and told me I wasn't supposed to be here. AP started frantically grabbing his clothes and telling me he didn't want any trouble. I told him he was a crap hero and he didn't deserve respect from anyone. He was in such a hurry to leave, I didn't have to say anything else to him. I dialed her father as she freaked out, cried, and demanded to know who I was calling. The first thing I told him was that I just walked in on his daughter cheating on me. I put him on speaker while he said he was devastated, and he never thought his daughter would do the same thing her mother did to destroy the family and cause so much heartbreak. She turned furious and didn't want to cure it. She tried to grab the phone from me, hanging up on her father, but I ran upstairs with it and locked myself in her daughter's room, picking her up to stop her crying. My wife frantically knocked on the door, tried to open it, and told me to let her in a few times before she started wailing and begging me for my forgiveness. She called me her husband several times as if that was enough for me to forgive her. She admitted she wasn't thinking about me or our daughter, or how much our marriage and family would be affected by her actions. I told her this was hopeless. She wanted me to trust her, but now proved she was a liar and cheater. She told me she knew what she did was a mistake, but she didn't do it out of love for him. She did it because AP made her feel better about herself. I told her she shouldn't have needed another man's or anyone's validation. I was her husband and the only man in her life for a reason. That's what marriage is. You don't rely on anyone but yourself and your spouse for meeting your emotional needs. I told her that emotions ultimately are not important and don't have to be an uncontrollable force of poor decision-making. She is supposed to make decisions based on what is best for her and her family, not fantasies or selfish desires. She didn't know what to say, so she just cried. When I finally opened the door and told her to leave, she lost her mind, screaming, telling me I couldn't just kick her out and separate her from our daughter. I told her I was going to file for divorce. She said until she was ordered to leave, she was going to continue living with me and our daughter, even if we slept in different rooms. And so we did that until our day in court. I showed the film of her cheating on me and got out of Almuin payments. On top of that, her father's house didn't have enough room for our daughter to live, so I won custody. They got visitation, but they are both miserable and bitter to this day. My ex-wife has no one to blame but herself. She's completely lost her identity because of this. She has nothing to call her own and is too depressed to try to get a job or make friends.